It's like 3 a.m., so I'm not gonna turn on the light. So you guys just get to deal with my smooth little voice as I talk to you. No, so kind of going off the idea that there's an illness in our nation. Um, how do I feel about the 1%? The 1%! We need to get our fair share. Um, you know, I don't hate the elite. I understand what the elite are. I understand their necessity in an ecosystem. But I do feel a typical amount of peasantry vengeance towards what I guess would be considered the knights and kings of our kingdom because of their arrogance and their neglect and their superficiality. And also the fact that they're just in general lying manipulative, that they're cunning, that they work and they isolate themselves from the entire classes of the people below them rather than integrating their lower classes with their upper class to create a merchant class that's worthwhile, you know? They're not investing in us as merchants. Instead, they invest in us as serfs or as people who can just, come in and visit the kingdom. Or slaves. And it's like, all three of those options are not the options that we agreed upon before I was born. There was an agreement when we were born that all of our class would be made free to become merchants, not serfs. That we would be merchants of our own future and our own stores, our own industries, our own way of life. So for me, I reject the socialist notion that centralized planning will help us, or that giving the state control to fix things will help us, or even that taxing the rich will help us. But I do believe that something should be done. The rich should be motivated in every way to share their resources from their own free accord. That there should be ways for them to invest in the uplifting of the lowest classes of society, without there being a reliance or a representation based relationship for these people, because that's not right. I should not have to sell you my allegiance, just be helped by you. Help should be given based off the need for help. At least upon neighbors, especially upon neighbors of the same neighborhood. Now, what happens in your own neighborhood is maybe more important to you immediately than that what happens to the next neighborhood. Sometimes the next neighborhood needs help. And see, this is the problem with foreign policy, is that we have to always look at neighbors for what they are. We can't help everyone, and we can't submit to everyone, and we can't be a part of every allegiance. I refuse to join with the rest of the kings and queens of the world and the rest of the nations of the world in rebellion against things that are necessary to the human existence and to the human identity and human purpose. I believe that there is a human purpose for our species, and I believe that that purpose is something phenomenal that we cannot begin to fathom or comprehend, and that it's not something that you're easily going to find out on your own in this world, but you'll find out something similar to it, which will lead you in a different direction in life and how you express yourself and work through the world. And I believe that's true. I believe that we are in the midst of a war between the elite. And the reason why I support, things that I do is because I feel like this war between the elites is between two different styles of how they want to lead the world into the end. And I feel like this choice between how and who leads it changes everything in how I'll be able to live and fight over the next couple decades as I try to secure my future. On one hand, we have a kingdom that promises that it will free us all, that every citizen within that kingdom has been helped and served and personally uplifted by the king, and that the best life that is achieved was achieved through this king and kingdom. They have a perfect ecosystem because they've focused on honing and making sure every aspect of their ecosystem is perfect for all of the serfs, all of the merchants, and all of the knights and kings. They have a system where they get their allegiance all squared away because the king, he pays all of his subjects. All of the subjects are isolated into their different groups because it's for their own good. All these things, all these groups produce their own wealth, but all this wealth is shared amongst the group and then supplemented with the king's, tithe. And I feel like just because the king's supplementing his tithe, like giving you a portion of his money, while also forcing you to give up all of yours unilaterally as a group, I just think it's wrong. This is why I believe in a flat tax rather than a tax for everyone. And I believe a flat tax would actually apply better to the rich because it would actually be a flat tax. 15% across the board for everybody increases exponentially as you move into the higher tax brackets. So there's no need to force higher taxes upon the rich. You just need one really good flat tax rather than the type of tax that we're doing now. And I think to renovate our tax system in such a way would be good, but also to augment it with gold and silver that actually has been accounted for, and also to start utilizing our debt in different ways than we are now, I think would be good. Because I think, one, we can sell our debt to nations who otherwise need more industry and need more. And I think that we could sell our debt while also assuring that we can give people certain discounts on some goods that other richer nations otherwise wouldn't be able to achieve because, one, they're richer and they should pay their fair share. The UN's always talking all that fine shit about being all progressive and socialist. Well, fine, let them eat their shit. And have America be the first nation that has them prove that shit by forcing them to give back. I actually think that would be worthwhile. I'd love to see the EU and the UN and China fucking justify why they're not going to give most of their resources and money away. But we can sell our debt to other nations as part of a promise of further trade and allegiance and travel. Then we could start marketing those areas as tourist traps, The first start of industry for many regions is travel. Once an area is more well-traveled, it starts to industrialize. People start to market off. The problem is we need to maintain a balance because our consumeristic culture tends to overstay its welcome in that industry rather than allowing those people to build their own industries based off the natural resources and land masses. But again, if they were going to build these resources well enough, they would have already had, and that area would have already been frequented, at least within the region. So you have to allow for a general amount of settling to happen amongst the population and amongst the interest of the population in order for this to work. Again, I think that colonialism teaches us a good model for how to share cultures and spread cultures, and I think that a demilitarized colonization model is the main model for which culture is changed in today's society. I think America should be working on being a society that influences other nations in such a way, through trade, through migration. I think Americans should be producing more than enough children to migrate to third worlds, to uplift those areas, and to convince them to change the habits and the lifestyles that otherwise are detrimenting them, whether it's overpopulating in a small region that has very low resources and requires a large amount of free will because, one, there's a high rate of infant mortality in these third world countries, but there's also a high rate of childhood underdevelopment. And that, I think, is also a problem. These problems are handled by the uplifting method that it comes from mingling a high society with a low society through intergenerational relations. And I think this is why marriage is such an important aspect of migration. This is why I think that it's important that some people are called anchor babies, because I think the term anchor baby shows much about the idea of the culture mindset of why people are here, They are an anchoring source. They must dig down. They must fight for resources. I mean, in the implication of the term, you get this idea of I must establish, I am coming in and needing to, anchor myself. Anchoring means that there's a boat above you. An anchor is only used to hold a boat in water that is, obviously not still. I mean, I could just tie my boat, to the dock. If, my boat was doing whatever it's doing. If I'm dropping an anchor, it's because I want to stand where I'm at in the water. Rather than be anchored to something that is, next to land, I'm anchored probably more out in the water. And that's the thing is, water is chaos. water is chaos, and the idea that we have thousands upon millions of people who come in from a chaotic environment who are, in a sense, dealing with the after effects and the psychic the scars of their trauma. They need to go into a nation that's ready to receive them and heal them, to give them a healing. This is why I think Christianity is vital to America, because if we had a Christianity that was biblical, it'd be a healing Christianity. I'd be able to take in refugees, take in immigrants, and help them heal from their trauma so that they're more easily able to step into the nation and become a part of the citizenry and become one of the local, benefactors of this nation's republic. And I don't know. I blame the rich because they benefit from replacing the native population. If the native population is replaced, they have no say in their heretical. No, this makes me think of heretic. In their heritage. We don't have a heritage anymore if we are replaced. If there are no more African Americans, there's no reason to keep talking about how Americans need to pay for slavery. If there's no whites, there's no need to continue to utilize the idea of slavery to guilt trip the white population, The answer to how to deal with the internment problem can be either government admits that they had a problem with interning its own citizens, apologize to its Asian citizenry, or it can get rid of its Asian population through slowly displacing them, removing them from, influence in their culture and from being members of society without having constant, shit being thrown at them. And then eventually you replace them. And this is what I think we're doing to whites. And I don't personally have a stake in it. I have a little nick box that keeps me and my perfectly safe culturally or non-appropriated box, or whatever you fuck left calls it now. Like, I'm good. I don't need to be defending conservatives or anything necessarily. But I do see value to the conservatism that exists in America. And I think that the liberalism that exists today is a far cry from the liberalism I would support. I'm not sold on the idea that in order to save our kids, even though we totally have no problem with killing them in droves, we have to sell our future to the government with a blank check so that they could fight future weather demons that they create. And there's nothing you can do to convince me that the government does not have more of a hand in climate change when they stimulate and influence all of the production and infrastructure in our society. To me, it's really just a case of the kings blaming the serfs for the fucking famine, when he's not buying the resources and distributing them to his serfs to make them less serfs and more of a productive, producing farmland society. I mean, again, the serfs could very easily become merchants if the king didn't give them money or food or water, but instead invested in receiving the resources to give to his people so that they can build industry on their own. A king is most effective when he's sharing not just grain and water, but sharing grain for planting, when he's able to acquire more planting materials for his farmers, when he's able to achieve more lumber at a cheaper price and at better, rates, without having to be shoehorned into trade groups or having to buy commercially to a group that is, shoehorning in their influence by taking over entire forest. The best king is able to mediate how his people can get and utilize the things that they have. And I think that that is the most important aspect of what our nation needs to do in order to survive the coming decades. And to be self-sufficient for when we're called to account, because we are still on that human testimony. On the account before all of mankind, I think that we are still making our testimony. And I want that testimony to be good. But any noodles, I hope you guys have a good night. I hope that everybody sleeps well. And yeah, peace out, guys. God bless.